Hi. So, coming to this, I had the thought about a saying ascribed to Isaac the Syrian. It is better to acquire purity of heart than to convert a whole nation of heathens. And that kind of just came out of the blue, thinking about some of the thoughts that I had been developing. So a very warm welcome to you all to this brief talk on transformative dynamic of spiritual direction in relation to flourishing devotionally in active ministry. As Josh has said, my name is David Clayton. I'm a practitioner, simple man of prayer. I'm a recognized, experienced spiritual director, supervisor, retreat leader, as already mentioned, with experience in spiritual practice. Historically, I was a director of a retreat house and a conference center, which led to me developing a neo-monastic community, which, along with my secular experiences, led me to develop more into behavior analysis and advising people around that. And as Josh mentioned, I've been involved in enabling church planting and fresh expression projects along the way. My point is, ecclesial growth in numbers or statistics also requires growth in spiritual formation and flourishing to be sustainable. Often the focus can be solely on statistical data as a form of success, as we've heard time and time again throughout the presentations. The action of being rooted at spiritual depth. We do, yeah, sorry, maybe jump. It's like, oh, it's coming to get me. So the action of being rooted in spiritual depth can be of benefit to any churchmanship or ministry. St. Ignatius of Loyola, 1491 to 1556, is a really good example of a historic planting and pioneer. He prayerfully considered a set of spiritual exercises that grew into an apostolic order, Society of Jesus, aka the Jesuits, founded 1540, and has been effective in ecclesial, educational and missional fields for over 500 years. And much drawn on by CMS, as Johnny Baker would often say, and groups like Vineyard's Order of Common Life, headed up by Jared Boyd, who have the Ignatian exercises central to their formative process. My point is, if there is a process that helps us go deeper into our true self, enabling authentic life and our actions to be more Christ-like, flourishing, then why should we not allow ourselves to be actualized by it? In part, the challenge of understanding the nature of the crossplay of success from a prayerful, spiritual, and active perspective. Human experience and formation are a challenge and an ongoing reality for the Christian. Prayer firmly grounds this reality towards growth in virtue and has often been described as a difficult process and is often oversimplified or simply avoided. Spiritual direction is a historic process that aids the prayerful deepening of the Christian journey. It is concerned with helping the person directly with his or her relationship with God, fundamentally looking at who is God for me and who am I for him. Styles are generally evocative and directive. The spiritual director has two main realities at its heart. Firstly, the ontological, the area of metaphysics relating that God has created mankind in his own image, Genesis 1, the icon. Secondly, this has a moral transition, that is conversion, conversio moral. A being in person, not study. This conversion is transformative in process and to be guarded against deformative. The process of spiritual direction moves us towards the divine image according to the likeness of Christ, or becoming God's own image, theosis, and is revealed in everyday life, behavior and being, praxis. The transcendent expressed in the incarnate, living deeply. In scripture, Luke 19, we see Zacchaeus seeking Jesus. He has noticed his desire and desires to know. So he acts from his own choice, changing his behavior, but then being called to be with, to be present relationally to the actual icon, Jesus. A relational process, not an academic assent from study, is offered. This being present relationally through the opportunity for conversion. This type of being with in conversion and becoming converted is also presented in the journey on the Emmaus Road, a place of confusion and doubt, becoming a God-initiated place of revelation and conversion. A key point of accompanying process of spiritual direction presented here is that it is God's action through engaging through relational practice. We could say prayer. So, the role of a spiritual director is to aid the conversion and interaction of God to the directee. You could say it has the prophetic in its nature. The good SD is skilled and experienced accompanier of conversion, enabling deeper communion between God and the directee. An image as if in a room with 3 chairs, the SD facilitates and mediates the interaction through prayer and deeply listening, drawing towards deeper spiritual framework with the aim to give opportunity to God to lead the conversion of nature through kenosis, emptying or purgative, with kenosis, union or oneness, and toward theosis, the deification or angelification of the soul, the process of actually becoming the image or icon of God, the point of Christianity. Like the image of the moon on water on a still night, manifesting the moon's light. These points tend to be leaned more into Orthodox theology. However, this aids us in painting a picture and understanding of spiritual direction and reductional transformation into flourishing as true self. As seen another way, in image, Michelangelo removing bits of marble to reveal the actual image of David's statue. I find this also helps. St. John of the Cross presents a process of stages in the living flame, using the analogy of the burning log. Firstly, 1. The log in its natural state has fire introduced to it, causing vapor and bad smell to leave, an analogy of sin leaving our lives. The transformation of the fire causes, secondly, noise. It becomes changed, crackles, an analogy of becoming excited and talking about God and witnessing. Finally, the 3rd stage of the log, blackened, burnt, transformed. Its nature becomes silent, becoming more and more flame, flame with flame. An analogy of becoming like Christ in image through becoming silent in the presence of God in actual spiritual union. A brief overview then to the process the SD accompanies. This process, like any process, goes better and works more completely when there is assistance, like when giving birth and the presence of a midwife giving assistance aids simply the outcome. And so, with spiritual direction, the spiritual director is simply an assistant to an actual process, not generating anything. Like the prophets and evangelists, this is a very specific charism and election, and presenting many tensions in the current contemporary culture. However, to paraphrase Francis de Sales, spiritual directors are very rare, 1 in a million, rare as hen's teeth. Henry Nouwen comments, to receive spiritual direction is to recognize that God does not solve our problems. or answer all our questions, but simply leads us closer to the mystery of our existence where all questions cease. Spiritual direction can be likened to a gymnasium, acting with spiritual exercises to develop spiritual muscles. Ta-da! The art of spiritual conversion has its historic roots with examples like Paul of Thebes, relating to Antony the Great, Evelyn Underhill with Baron von Hugel. And currently, many of our clergy have deep and trustworthy relationships, partnering to reveal Christ. Intrapersonal growth, enabling an interpersonal kingdom dynamic to be outworked deeply. John Wesley, points to this saying, "Give me 100 preachers who fear nothing but sin and desire nothing but God, and I care not a straw whether they be clergymen or laymen. Such alone will shake the gates of hell and set up the kingdom of heaven on earth." Something here that may be the key to church planting is motivation and actual state of conversion, flourishing as true self. This makes the point of value in spiritual direction in relation to active ministry, that being more present to God or allowing God to be present to us, becoming transformed into the image of Christ will outwork in a deeper living of the gospel. However, let's be clear. I presented a method of entering into a transformative prayer process in an essay to an Anglican vicar once recently, known to this setup, so I'll not name him, using St. Teresa of Avila's method as its kind of basis, prayerful basis. And their response was drawing a conclusion. On the one hand, without prayer, growth in the virtues leading to a transformative life is impossible. And on the other hand, without growth in the virtues, without prayer is impossible. Simple, but not easy. Amen. I did appreciate the conversation I had with them. So how important is transformative life of faith, hope, and love then? The cardinal virtues in active ministry. Is it modality in sodality? Often this area of virtue is seen as how we present humility, classically aligning with piety. Here the character has a light shone upon it, and our conscience is brought to the fore. Concupiscence appears, or yetzirah. As with any client-facing role, how do we present our true self when being in a place of interpersonal tension? Often, psychology will help in this area in dealing with our internal realities, our drives, our traumas. As Chase Hughes, an ex-Marine CIA trainer and fellow behavior analyst, presents, 1, all humankind is insecure and broken. 2, we all wear masks. 3, we all don't want people to see behind our masks. 4th, and finally, all mankind is influenced by our early years, either 1 to 2, 1 to 7, or 1 to 14, dependent on your development and growth of critical thinking, depending on the perspective on that. So what am I saying here? Well, this is not about self-improvement, but actually about becoming more. Not walking with a guru, but somebody helping you to become present to God and to yourself, to become transformed towards virtue, becoming like Christ, present to God. I mean, in reality, if you were giving birth in a situation, would you say yes, please, to a midwife who was offering you service with dignity? The point then is how to enable good and actual spiritual direction to those whom it will benefit their ministry. How is the message of this ministry currently being portrayed and is operationally being manifest to the best AMDG, ad majorem Dei gloriorum, as Ignatius would say, in your area? How can we enable for the greater glory of God to be our keystone so that our projects don't simply last 2 to 5 years, but 500 years, as the Jesuits have just celebrated? Let's change our lens, our frame somehow. May God increase and I decrease, as we hear John the Baptist in John 3 cry. Our humility and our service are transformed often through trial and suffering, becoming a new ontological reality as we shift through following Jesus along the way through the experience of the cross. In my experience, accompanying individuals deeply through their life and through their spiritual experience over decades, I've seen individuals thrive, flourish, and make clear difference in their areas, such as church planting. Not down to me or my skill or experience, but down to the actual process they have engaged with. St. Ignatius of Loyola, Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross all emphasize good spiritual direction is necessary for deep conversion. So let our desire to make an impact on our context be steered by our devotion. The love and desire to imitate Christ and become like Christ through our unique God-given election. His kingdom come, his will be done through us with the assistance of good spiritual direction. In ending, Evelyn Underhill states in The Mount of Purification and also in her collected papers, much is now being said about evangelism. But before we get effective evangelism, we have to get effective evangelists. Evangelism is useless unless it is the work of the one devoted to God, willing and glad to suffer all things for God, penetrated by the attractiveness of God. New machinery, adaptation, and adjustment are not the first need of the Church of England, but a more devoted and adoring and sacrificial soul. So may we walk the walk. Thank you very much for your time.